This is the fun part where we see everyone.
Start popping in, yeah. Angela, can you hear my kids watching television in the other room?
I cannot.
Okay, good.
Hello, everyone currently signing in to this Lamont admission webinar. We're so happy to have you with us. We're going to get started in about another 90 seconds or so. Okay, everyone. Hello, my name is Angela Mitchell. I'm the enrollment specialist for the Lamont School of Music here at the University of Denver. With me is Stephen Campbell, the Director of Admission. And we're going to be chatting during this webinar about preparing for your upcoming interview. And just while I'm pulling up slides, we'd love to see where everybody is from. So please utilize that chat and just stick in there how about where you're from and what your instrument is or voice type. And as we go through, I have a couple of slides to share. As we're going through, please feel free to utilize the Q&A feature to ask any questions you have. Stephen's going to be monitoring the Q&A while I'm driving the slides. And when we get done with all the slides, we'll answer all the questions you guys have. So feel free to put the questions in while we go along or save them for the end. So. All right, people from all over the place. This is great. This is really great. A lot of Colorado folks. I'm seeing Arizona, Louisiana, seeing some folks from, Ecuador, great. California, Florida, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma. It's so great to have all you guys with us. All right, so I'm going to just share my slides here. So we are going to be chatting about these upcoming Zoom interview days. So if you are somebody who's auditioning for the Lamont School of Music, then you are also going to be doing a Zoom interview. So those interviews are happening on the next 3 Saturdays. And by the way, you may not know this, but normally we don't do this. We usually have everybody come to campus and do a live audition and perform for the faculty. But this year, due to COVID, we've changed things. We're asking folks to send in pre-recorded video auditions, and then we have these live interviews with the faculty on those Saturdays. So you're going to be getting your exact time and your Zoom link and additional details 2 weeks prior to your interview day. So if you're a January 30th or a February 6th interview day, you will have already gotten your Zoom link and time. If your interview is on February 13th, you'll be getting that on Friday. We'll also follow up with you the day before your interview, just with a final reminder and a double check of your time. So on the day of your interview, you'll click on the link that we sent you, and you'll go into the waiting room. We recommend that you sign in about 5 to 10 minutes before your assigned time. There will be a Lamont student representative in the waiting room to help you with anything you need, help to answer any questions you have. One thing that we do ask is please make sure that your name on Zoom matches the name on your application, so that the faculty can obviously keep you straight. When you get into your interview, expect to have all of the faculty of that department present in the interview, and any of them can ask you questions, and you can ask any of them questions. So, for example, if you're a violin player, you're going to have the whole string department in there, so the cello professor, the double bass professor, and the viola professor as well. And depending on your area, your interview will include different things. So for all of you, no matter what you do, there will be Q&A. So they'll ask you a few questions really to just get to know you. And then depending on what you do, you might also do some live playing or some singing. So that's on my next slide. All right, so what to expect. So getting into the specifics now. You'll see that it varies by department what you're going to be expected to do. So I'm going to just run through these, and you might want to screenshot this or take a picture with your phone. This also is going out in all of our communications to you about the details of what to expect with your time and your Zoom link and all of that. You'll find that in that email. So if you're a brass player, you can expect to be in there for 20 minutes and be prepared to play one of your prepared audition pieces, probably not the whole thing, and be prepared to do some sight singing. If you're a percussion player, it'll be 20 minutes, and be prepared to do some sight singing. Notice I said sight singing, not sight reading. Professor Kinsey, that's an important part of his teaching, is he has his students do sight singing, so there'll be a little bit of that. If you're a woodwinds player, just Q&A, no playing. If you're a string player, be prepared for playing one of your audition pieces, a segment of one of your audition pieces. Pianists, just Q&A. If you're a singer, and this is classical, not jazz, be prepared for some sight singing and a tonal memory test. And then if you are guitar and harp or jazz or composition, Q&A only. All right, we've put together a few tips that we thought might be helpful for you as you go into these interviews. So things to do ahead of time: test your internet connection and your audio and video settings. Make sure that you're coming across well to whoever's on the other side. Treat this like a in-person audition. So dress professionally, make sure you're well groomed and showered. Make sure that you have nice lighting so that the faculty can see you. And if you're able to, find a private place where you're not going to get interrupted, like whether it be a bedroom or a living room, just somewhere where you're not going to have siblings or pets coming in to bother you. Double check your Zoom settings to get the best possible audio before you go into your session. That'll be on my next slide. I'll show you specifically what the settings are that we recommend. And then if you're doing any playing or singing, just do prepare as you would anyway for an in-person audition. So make sure you're all warmed up and you've looked over your repertoire ahead of time. And then this is a good one. Come prepared with some questions of your own. It'll show the faculty that you're engaged and that you're invested in coming here. You really want to come here, and that you've done some research. And then don't worry if you experience any kind of technical difficulties, if your internet goes out or your computer crashes, just let us know, and we'll work with you about rescheduling your interview. And the final tip that I want to leave you with is just, this is the same for going into an audition situation as well. Know that the faculty are rooting for you. They are excited to meet you, and they want you to do a great job. All right, so here are those Zoom settings that I mentioned. So if you go into your your Zoom settings and then the audio tab, there are a couple of things that are going to give you the best sound for this kind of situation where you might be playing or singing over Zoom. So the first one is uncheck where it says automatically adjust microphone volume. Okay. The next one is under the background noise section, make sure you set that to low because we don't want Zoom to suppress what's going on in the room. And then under here, music and professional audio, make sure you have these 3 boxes checked. So show in meeting option to enable original sound from the microphone. Check high fidelity music mode and check echo cancellation. So those are just what we have found are the best Zoom settings. And we recommend that you get all that set up before you go into your interview. All right, so a few resources that we will have for you on the day of the interview. We're going to have this Zoom room all day long that me and Stephen will be in. You can drop in and ask any questions. This is for students, for parents, for faculty. Put the number up there. We'll be there from 9 a.m. to 5:30 on Mountain Standard Time on all 3 days. And don't worry, these numbers and these links are sent to you in your email confirmation as well. Also on all 3 days at noon, we're hosting an info session for students and parents. It'll be led by our director, Dr. Keith Ward. Stephen and myself will be there, and we'll also have a few current Lamont students on hand to answer questions. Additionally, other Lamont students, or some overlapping, will be available in those Zoom waiting rooms as you're waiting to log into your interview, and take advantage of them. Ask them any questions that you have about what it's like to be a Lamont student. Hear it straight from the horse's mouth, and those are going to be students from your department. So you can hear straight from, another Lamont woodwind player or another Lamont string or brass player what it's like to be. So think of some good questions for them. And then we just have a few more resources to share with you. Again, we're trying to simulate the great things that we would have been providing in person, such as performances. So we invite you to check out our YouTube channel there. And I'll make sure to put these links in the chat so you can copy and paste them rather than write them down. But we have so many wonderful performances available on our YouTube channel. We also have about a 7 or 8 minute virtual tour available of the Newman Center for the Performing Arts, which is Lamont's home. And this really replicates the kind of tour that you would get in person if you came to visit us. It's even narrated by yours truly, and you go into all of the performance and rehearsal and practice and classroom spaces in the Newman Center. So you can check that out. And then we also have this financial aid seminar pre-recorded available for you to watch. So, okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that and get those links in the chat that I was just referring to. And now we will go to questions.
Angela, I will go ahead and shout out some of these questions because there are some ones that I think we should probably just answer live. Sure. One of the ones that has come up a couple times is related to whether or not the applicant, the interviewee, will be able to choose which audition piece they perform first, or if the faculty will choose. I don't know if you want to answer that.
Yeah, great question. In a live audition situation, it's invariably going to be that the faculty will choose the first piece that you play. In this kind of situation where they're only going to be probably asking you to play one piece, it's going to be their choice. So unless they're feeling in a different kind of mood that day, they may ask you, hey, what do you feel like playing? And then in that case, be prepared to play whatever you think shows you off the best.
Another question is specific to the voice area about the tonal memory test. Is there anything any guidance you'd like to give them on the tonal memory test for voice auditions?
I wish I knew more about that. I haven't seen the test myself, but from what so in case you all don't know, Stephen and I are both singers. So what I understand a tonal memory test to be is you will hear a melody played on the keyboard, because there will be a faculty member there with a keyboard, and they'll play 7 or 8 notes or 10 notes and ask you to try to sing it back. So yeah, I would advise y'all don't stress out too much about those kinds of things. There isn't a whole lot you can do to prepare for them at this point, especially. But just kind of go in there and relaxed and know that it's one of, like, so many other things that they're using to evaluate you. So it's certainly not gonna make or break your audition.
Right. Alice asks the voice auditions, or excuse me, if the jazz auditions include voice, and they do. Alice, sorry, I meant to type that one, not answer it live, but on a Zoom. Let's see, what else do we have? We have a question about composition interviews being 10 minutes longer than other interviews, and I was wondering if there's any reason for that, or if we know if there's a reason for that.
Yeah, well, I can tell you guys, we left it up to the faculty to determine how long they all wanted their interviews to be, and what these interviews should entail. I can give you a little more context on the composition interview. So let me give you the blurb that they included in that. So the 20-minute interview will focus on the compositional faculty getting to learn about you, your compositional interests, and musical background. For example, they may ask you about the works submitted in your portfolio, other composers or compositions that have influenced or inspired you, and what you would like to accomplish as a composition major. So I hope that helps. Nothing too surprising there. Pretty standard questions. Yeah.
Questions about how the sight reading test is going to work in the areas that require it.
So as I understand it, the faculty will share their screen, and they will have the selection pulled up on their screen. So you will see their shared screen, and then you will sing off of that.
Okay, we talked about, there's some questions here, just general questions about what they can expect to be asked during their interview, and I'll pipe in a little bit and then let Angela take it away. I mean, again, the main purpose of this interview, folks, is for the faculty just to get to know you, right? They're going to ask about your background, your interests. There will be more area-specific questions as they're appropriate, like composers. They're undoubtedly going to ask you, what do you like to compose and why? What genres? What are your what sorts of music inspires you? That sort of thing. This is not across the board. This is not a situation where our faculty are trying to trick you, right? Like trivia questions that they're expecting you to know. It's really going to be much less than that, much more of a back and forth, trying to get to know each other. So we really don't want you to stress out too much about that Q&A session. I hope that kind of answers. Angela, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think that's great. I think that's perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
And, yeah, come prepared with your own questions, because that'll really help that always facilitates the conversation.
To reiterate, when you go to your interview or for your audition, depending on what area you're in, all of the faculty from that department will be there. There are a couple of questions in the Q&A about that. If you're a trumpet player, the rest of the brass faculty will also be in the room with you. String faculty, if you're a string player, and so on and so forth. Let's see.
Alan is asking if I have a stereo mic, would it be okay to turn on stereo in the settings? Sure. Sounds like, I mean, if you have used that before and it works, then go for it. Will is asking, are composers expected to bring anything other than the scores to our music? I'm assuming you mean to the interview. No, just bring yourself and your questions, and just if you're unsure about anything having to do with the program or the requirements, you can always answer or ask those kinds of questions as well. Okay, so we answered, or as Isabel is asking, I'm auditioning as a jazz vocalist. Will I only have an interview or also the sight reading and tonal recall? Isabel, just the Q&A. Yeah, so that sight reading and tonal memory test only applies to classical vocalists. Okay, so Alisana asking for voice being prepared to sing some of our repertoire. Should we have our own accompaniment tracks prepared? Alisana, so don't worry about having to sing any of your prepared repertoire at your interview with the voice faculty. They won't ask for that. There'll be a sight reading test and a tonal memory exercise, and you don't need to have an accompanist for either of those. And yes, that is, yeah, so to that anonymous question, correct. Voice applicants will not need to perform any of your prepared pieces at the interview. And then Caroline's asking, will there be a time limit to learn the sight singing before we sing it? Oh, Caroline, I wish I knew the answer to that. As I recall, in these situations when they give the sight reading test, you will have a matter of time to look at it, and they'll say, let us know when you're ready, and as long as you're not taking like 10 minutes or something, I'm sure it'll be just fine. I think 30 seconds, a minute is probably fine. Oh, and yeah, if anyone came in here late, yeah, Dustin, we're going to be posting this on YouTube, so anyone can watch this later on. Lane Randall is asking, will the recording and production faculty be present for students applying for that degree? Lane, I'm afraid not. That's not been part of our process in the past to have the recording and production faculty interview people, so we're not having that this year. But Lane, if you're wondering, we had a recording and production info session last week that you can check out, that we recorded. So that's up on our YouTube page. Okay. What faculty will be present for jazz and production interviews? Okay, so there's no production interviews, Tara, but for the jazz interviews, you can expect the whole jazz faculty to be there. So all 12 of them or whatever it is from all the different areas will be there. Okay, so and then Amachi's asking, for people who will have sight reading, will we need our instruments readily available? Yes, and so that would be, let me just double check who those areas are that are sight reading. So that would be, so brass players have to sight read, voice has to sight read, and percussion has to sight read. Only percussion, you're sight singing, not with your instrument. So brass players, yes, bring your instrument. String players, yes, bring your instrument. Voice, bring your instrument. And that is, no one else needs to bring their instrument. So woodwinds, you do not need to bring your instrument. Piano, do not bring your instrument. Guitar and harp, any jazz people, do not bring your instrument. And composers, no instrument. Okay, so yes, I would be happy to go back to that slide. Somebody would like to see the slide for everything we need to have prepared for the interview and audition. So let me go ahead and share my screen again.
While Angela is doing that, there's a question about prospective student lessons. DU doesn't have a policy on requiring faculty to give free prospective student lessons, but so many of our faculty will do that. What we usually say is reach out to them and say, hey, I've been interested in a prospective student lesson, and just ask what they charge. That gives them the opportunity then to say, don't worry about it, or name their price depending on what their policy is. So yes, we highly recommend prospective studio lessons. Please reach out to them. All of their contact information is on the studio website pages online. I'll drop the link in the chat again.
All right. So, yeah. So Kaylin, who's asking for what to expect in the jazz Q&A. Yeah. Again, it's gonna be just like getting to know you questions. They want to know, like, maybe they'll ask you, what kind of jazz artists do you listen to? What inspires you? How long have you been playing? What ensembles do you perform in? What composers really inspire you? Don't expect, there aren't going to be any kind of like gotcha questions of, quizzing you on jazz terminology or anything like that. They just want to get to know you. And you wouldn't know this, because you haven't come to past auditions, but the live auditions, they're really, the faculty are so warm and inviting, and they'll make you feel very welcome. And it'll be the same way in these Zoom interviews. As a brass player, should I have all my audition music ready in case they ask for a certain piece? Yes. So brush up on all of the pieces that you submitted for your audition. It may ask you to play any one of those.
I can take the next one. Yeah. And the Connor asks about the timeline. So how long it takes between having your interview and then learning of your acceptance decision. It's different for grad and undergrad. For grad, we will finish all of our auditions pretty much by that later February deadline, right? And then we spend about a month coming up, meeting with faculty and talking about scholarship decisions and all of that. And then we will send all grad decisions by March 15th. And you'll get that all via email. It'll include your admission decision and scholarship decision. Undergrads, we finish our auditions about that same time. Undergrad admissions starts considering applications and making their decisions about February 15th through that week. And that's the same time the Lamont is determining our decisions and scholarship and whatnot. You'll hear from the university at the end of February with an email that just says, check your admission decision. You'll go in, it'll be a yes or no, right? Or a wait list, or you'll get just the admission to DU and Lamont. Then your Lamont scholarship, the financial aid package, is going to come a little bit later. So you'll get that in the mail, usually around that same mid-March period, the first or second week of March. And then you have until May 1, if you're an undergraduate student, to make your decision and let us know. And for graduate students, we ask for your decision by April 15th. So Connor, I hope that answers your question. These are good questions, folks. Mm-hmm. I'll start to slow down here a little bit.
Are there additional forms we need to fill out as a financial aid application?
Keely, if you're an undergraduate student, we ask for the FAFSA and the CSS profile. If you would like to have need considered in your scholarship decisions, right? So we look through undergrad students and look at your ability, your music ability, so your audition score, your interview score, your academics, and then your financial need if you submit those documents. So if need-based aid is going to be a consideration for you, please submit the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Keely, I'm talking about Lamont aid, but if you want to be considered for loans or work study or Pell Grant, you need to submit the FAFSA. So please follow all the instructions that the Office of Financial Aid sends you. For graduate students, I recommend submitting the FAFSA just because there are some of our endowed scholarship funds require demonstrated financial need, and I won't know if you have demonstrated financial need without that FAFSA, but most of our aid on the grad side does not require any additional financial aid applications. I'll answer the other one too really quick, Angela. So another question in the Q&A is, if I don't get into the School of Music, does that mean I can't get into DU? So as undergraduate students, you filled out that Lamont School of Music application, and on that form, we ask if you'd like to be considered for a non-music major should you not pass your audition. If you submitted an answer to that question, say you want to be considered for psychology, and you don't pass your Lamont audition, you will automatically be switched to psychology and considered for psychology. You'll get an email from me saying, hey, sorry you didn't pass your audition, but we are going to consider you for psychology. And then you'll hear from the school, from DU, as to whether or not you were admitted to psychology.
Yeah. Sam is asking for the jazz drum set audition, will I be expected to play on a full set? Well, Sam, we already have your audition video, so you're all set there. And for your interview, for your live Zoom interview, jazz, you're not going to play anything. You're just going to be talking, just Q&A with the faculty. And then Alice asking, can I sing the same song that I've sung on my video that I sent in my application? So Alice, you're not going to be, if you're doing a classical voice audition, you've sent in your audition video, you're not going to sing any of those songs in your interview. You're just going to do sight singing and tonal memory test. So don't worry about that. Oh, jazz. Okay. Well, if that's the case, Alice, you're not going to be singing in your jazz audition. You're just going to be talking. That's the same for all of the jazz interviews. And yeah, okay, so if you haven't gotten a confirmation on your interview date, so if you're expecting that and you haven't gotten it yet, check your junk folder in your email. Sometimes they've been going into that. Otherwise, it could be that you haven't filled out the Lamont School of Music application yet. So, which is you have to apply to the University of Denver, and then you also have to apply to the Lamont School of Music. So I'm going to put my email in the chat. Email me if you think you should have gotten that, you didn't.
And this is the time in the program where we remind you that there are no dumb questions, and Angela and I are here to answer your questions. So email us, email Angela or me, I'll put my email in there too, or the music admission email address. We're here to help you guys get through this, right? And do your best. So please don't hesitate.
Yeah. All right. And yeah, thank you everybody for hanging in there with us during this kind of abnormal admission process that we are dealing with right now. So Connor's asking, how much does the brief live performance played in our admission play into your admission into Lamont? Would they weigh our submitted audition videos more? Connor, yeah, I believe they would. You know, just one thing to say is that this is one piece of many that the faculty are using to evaluate you. So they have your audition video, and I think this live component, if you're being asked to play in your live interview, is a way for them to tell, is it the same person that submitted the video? You know, it's just a quick check that you are who you say you are. So yeah, it matters, but Connor, it's not going to make or break your application. And then Isabel's asking, are music majors still able to minor or double major in another non-musical subject? Yes, they are, absolutely. So that's a very common occurrence. And there's a couple different ways to do it, depending on what the other thing is that you're interested in doing. But music majors, absolutely no problem. You can minor in something else, and usually you don't impact your graduation date. And then double majoring, that's kind of another topic, but yeah, people do double majors all the time. And depending on what that other major is that you're doing, it's just a matter of working closely with your advisor in the music school and your advisor in that other area to make sure that you're hitting all of those requirements and graduating in a timely manner. So, and Isabel, if you want to chat more about that, just send me an email and I'd be happy to talk with you about what would that look like to double major.
Yeah, and Isabel, you're giving us a chance to plug our awesome student advisor, Rachel Lim, who really, she will meet with every undergraduate student at least once a quarter and go through your kind of plan going forward and check in to make sure you're on schedule to graduate. And so she will work closely with you and with your advisor in your other major program, just to make all the things fit together. It's a huge special thing about Lamont to have a person who is a musician herself be tasked with making sure all of you are well taken care of. And there are a couple others that I'll jump in on here really quick, Angela. Helen, so basically we will be hearing from both BU and Lamont for admissions, or just one acceptance letter for the two of them. For undergrad, you will get one email or letter. It'll be electronic though, so you'll log into your account to see your decision. You'll get one decision that will reflect both Lamont and DU. It will say, congratulations on your admission to the University of Denver and Lamont School of Music. If you're only admitted to DU and not Lamont, you will have heard from me before saying, I'm sorry you didn't pass your audition. And then your letter from DU will just say, congratulations, you've been admitted to DU. So that's for the admission decision. The scholarship, Helen, will come later for undergrads. You'll get that a separate letter for your Lamont scholarship, which leads me into Daphne's question about what type of scholarships are there for music students and how are they determined. So one of the things that's a little bit different about the Lamont-DU relationship is that Lamont does all of the scholarship for music students. So if you went online and you said, I'm going to get an academic merit scholarship and I'm going to get a need-based aid and I'm going to get a music scholarship, that's not really how it works at Lamont. So what we will do is we will look at your musical ability, first and foremost, your academics, and your need, and then we will combine them all into one kind of holistic award, the Lamont Scholarship, and that will be the aid you get from DU and Lamont. The rest of the aid you may get is going to be federal and state typically. So the takeaway there is that we're looking at all of these different things to give you an award that we hope will enable you to attend, but that we do not stack music awards with academic merit awards.
Lydia, don't worry that you don't have an external microphone. We've instructed faculty, anyone who's like listening over Zoom, to don't take that audio quality into your evaluation. They will be listening for your musical qualities to as best as they can. But yeah, we're keeping the playing field equal in terms of that. So yeah, so don't worry about not having like a expensive microphone. And Connor, yeah, you're for the piano interview, you will be in the room with both Dr. Mayer and Dr. Cheng, and that should be it as far as I understand it. Sadie's asking, what are some strong qualities that Lamont is looking for in its voice applicants? Oh, what a great question. It's probably generally speaking, it's what we're looking for in all of our music students, which is curiosity and willingness to learn. First of all, we're looking for some innate talent and musicality that you understand. Specifically for voice, probably you understand like phrasing, musical phrasing. And then here's some more voice specific things. If you're singing in a foreign language, know exactly what every word means that you're singing. And another thing for vocalists especially is you have text, and that is different from instrumentalists. So you had best use that text to tell a story. So yeah, they're looking for you to move them and tell a story in some way. And I think I'll leave it there. I think that's some of the biggest things that they're looking for in their voice.
One of the things we are fond of saying, right, is that they are certainly looking for technical facility, right? They want to hear you play accurately and well. But also, many of you, if you're undergrads in particular, are auditioning to start your kind of educational musical career at the college level. They're not expecting 17, 18, 19-year-old cellists to sound like Yo-Yo Ma, right? There is a level of them looking for that potential, that creativity, that love of music, that communication through their audition. But they want you to hear you play the right notes too. Really quick, this one is so important. Somebody asked, can we wait to fill out our additional financial aid papers until we have our acceptance letters? Please don't do this. The reason, it's going to vary from school to school a little bit, but the reason is that if you are going to need to be considered in your aid. So when I look through all of your files, right, and I'm working on scholarship decisions, if you have not submitted financial aid paperwork, I'm only going to look at how well you played and your academics. And so then later, if you come back and say, we can't afford this, look at our financial aid paperwork, we really need more need-based aid. I've already awarded our scholarship, right? So I have much less flexibility at that point to accommodate for need-based aid. So please fill out that FAFSA, that CSS profile, go through all the things that the Office of Financial Aid wants you to go through if you want that considered in your aid. If you've gotten your acceptance in your scholarship and then you do it, it's too late for me to consider it. You'll still be eligible for loans and Pell Grants and work study if you were before, but it's too late for me to adjust it on your Lamont scholarship.
Kaylin, who's wondering about getting into sports, it really depends on what sports you're looking at and if you're what level of involvement that you're interested in doing. But no, it shouldn't get in the way. As long as you're prioritizing, if you're a music major, prioritizing your music studies and not skipping rehearsal to go to lacrosse practice or something, then you should be just fine. And that's such a great thing to do anyway, and we really encourage that, to stay active as a musician and get involved in not just sports but other student organizations on campus. Take advantage of that. Alan, there is no check-in session. Do just show up 5 to 10 minutes before your interview. Okay. All right. So keep those questions coming, guys. Really great to it's making us, I'm sure, think of some things that we haven't thought of before. So thank you for these questions.
Yeah. It's new to us too, folks, all of this online audition stuff, but we're here to take care of you as best we can.
Yeah.
And yes, of course, Jillian said farewell as she's taking off. Feel free, of course, to leave as you need.
I'm gonna put one more link in the chat for y'all, just in case. This is a link to where you go to find all of your audition requirements as well as interview specifics. So that's a list to the studio pages, so you can go and find your instrument or your area. Click on that, and you'll find a lot of really good stuff on that page. So things like faculty contact information as well. So Helen's asking how many people from the string faculty will be at the interview. It'll be all of them. So it'll be our violin professors, Linda Wong and Igor Pikazin, our viola professor, Basil Vendries, our double bass professor, Sue Cahill, and yeah, they'll all be there. And
you name them all off the top of your head. You also may see we have two Suzuki teachers as well, Kathleen Spring and Heather Hadley may also be there as well. Fox, can composition students participate in other music ensembles? Yes, please do. So you will have composition seminar, which will count as one of your ensemble credits. Most bachelor music students have 2 ensembles every quarter. Composers have 1 ensemble and comp seminar. So you not only can but if you're a bachelor of music student, you are required to participate in another music ensemble. But it's true for composers and it's true for everyone else. You can participate in as many ensembles as your schedule allows and as to your heart's content, right? They're all open to audition to all students.
How are classes conducted with COVID? Very carefully, very carefully. So DU learned a lot of lessons last quarter, and we are continuing in the music school to largely run academic courses online, and ensembles and private lessons are happening in person. So everything that's happening in person is happening very carefully with all of the COVID protocols in place. So we have, for example, limits on how much time you can be in a room before you have to leave the room and let the air purifying system do its work. Masks are required 100% all the time, everywhere. And we have hand washing instructions everywhere you look, and we have hand sanitizer everywhere you look, as well as limits on how many people can be in a room as well. So like the orchestra went to strings only with all wind and brass players signing up for wind ensemble, but they were getting together in person and still making things happen. So we expect it to be like this at least through, I mean, surely this quarter we're in now, as well as the spring quarter. And then, well, yeah, Alice is asking, do you think by fall 2021 we will have classes in person? That sure is the hope. That sure is the hope. Yeah. So, of course, a lot depends on what happens with public health in the coming months, and vaccine distribution. So, but I'll tell you, we've been very impressed with the leadership at DU and how they've been handling this. DU has partnered with National Jewish Health to have a very comprehensive plan in place. So we feel like we're in good hands.
Yeah, one thing I would just add on to that, I'm sorry, Angela, if I missed this while I was typing in the Q&A, but I just think our students have been incredibly grateful for the live music making, right? To get together with other musicians and make music in some capacity, even though that might be a smaller than a full orchestra or full wind ensemble, it's still incredibly gratifying. And Lamont put on a huge number of live stream performances last year, considering the unique times, and that was fall, right? And I think we've gotten better at making these things work. Also, if you've been following the news, you'll see that that classroom teaching is really not a terribly dangerous event. That the COVID outbreaks on campuses across the country, and including DU, were related to social events and less so to academic ones. So we are all crossing our fingers that we can be back to normal in the fall. But even if we aren't, we really feel strongly that your experience would be a good one.
So this question: can someone take composition classes if they're majoring in VP? I'm not sure what VP is, but yeah, you can take music classes if you're majoring in something non-music. Lamont has a wide variety of academic courses that any non-major can register for. And then if there are specific classes that are set aside for music majors, but that you're really interested in taking, but you're not majoring in music, you can always get the permission of the professor and still register for those classes. Oh, and Kaylin's wondering about practicing on the drums and what we have available. Kaylin, we have great facilities and equipment available for you, and I don't really hear about there being like people not getting enough time to practice on the drums that we have there. So yeah, we have specific practice rooms just for drum kit and percussion, and yeah, if you're in the program, that will be available to you. So
I'll jump on Connor's question about he asks if you do not receive acceptance into Lamont, would you be able to re-audition at the end of the first semester or at the end of our first year? Quick little thing that views on the quarter system. So it's kind of cool. We do 3 10-week quarters. So you actually get to hit a lot more subjects over your first year. So after the first quarter, Connor, if you wanted to re-audition for the major, that certainly is a possibility. It's going to depend somewhat on which program you're applying to or you're interested in. So for example, if you are a Bachelor of Music student, that program requires lessons, 4-credit lessons in every quarter of attendance. And so you'll be a little behind even after 1 quarter if it's the Bachelor of Music you are looking for. The Bachelor of Arts is a little more flexible, and you have there's a better chance to be able to still graduate in 4 years, even adding it a little bit later. Now, kind of one of the things we'll have to talk about in specific situations is our academic coursework, theory, oral skills. Those things are what we call sequential courses. And so they build first quarter, the second quarter builds on the first quarter, the third quarter builds on the previous quarters. And so some of you'll just be a little out of sync, but it's something that we would sit down and walk you through individually and really figure out how it would look for you.
All right. Lauren is wondering how many open spots are there for violin?
Yeah, I'll go look in the
okay.
And put that in the chat.
Okay, great. And then Kaylin is asking, what's the overall music environment around campus? Yeah, Kaylin, I think if you're wondering what kind of gigs are available or performance are available in the Denver area. Denver is a very thriving, has very thriving music scene, especially in jazz and classical. So I think you'll find that there is always something going on, always, well, in COVID times, maybe not performances every night of the week, but there in normal times, absolutely, there's all these performances going on in downtown Denver. Dazzle is a jazz club you should certainly know about if you're coming to Denver. They are right downtown, and it's easy to get downtown from DU campus. There's a light rail station, and you can hop on the light rail, and it lands you right downtown. In fact, right by the like performing arts area of downtown. So. And then Ryan's asking, what is the community like within the college and not just the music school? Yeah, so we're a school of about, is it 16,000 or so total, and about half and half grad and undergrad, and that presents, it's like a really good size. It's like not enormous, but it's big enough that you have all of the resources of a big private research university, which DU is. And then one thing that I think is like specific to DU and the environment and the community here is the love of doing things outdoors, because it comes with the part of the country that we're in, really beautiful part of the country where the Rocky Mountains end and the Great Plains begin. So you have hiking and world-class skiing just like a short drive away. People love to spend time outside. We have really excellent weather here. We have on average 300 days of sunshine every year. So folks love to get out, and oh, and there's also just a really great like food scene around town. The original Chipotle is right next to campus. So the first Chipotle ever. How about that? What kind of opportunities do composition students have to have their pieces performed? So composers are actually every quarter, with the exception of the first quarter of your freshman year, you are actually required to have a piece performed on the Lamont Composers Concert Series. So you're getting your stuff performed all the time. And beyond the Composers Concert Series, you'll occasionally have opportunities to work with chamber groups that perform your pieces. And every once in a while, you might find one of the larger ensembles performing works as well. But you'll find a ton of musicians willing and ready to perform your music, and that's the great thing about coming to music school. How are international students received to DU? Is Latin jazz? Yeah. Oh, Latin jazz is absolutely welcomed in the Lamont Jazz program. As a jazz student, you're going to be exploring all of the subgenres of jazz, and Latin jazz is absolutely one of those. And Marcello, we have a really wonderful international student community at Lamont and at DU, and they are welcomed. And we have a whole staff and department of people to help our international students come here, and it's called ISSS, International Student and Scholar Services. In fact, I'm going to put that email in the chat just in case we have any international students on here that need that contact info. I'm going to put that in the chat.
While she's doing that, Ryan asks, during the year, are the practice rooms usually crowded? So, of course, right now we're in a slightly different environment because the practice rooms need time to have the air run through the ventilation system in between. So it's heavily scheduled now in a way that it hasn't been in years past. And Ryan, what I would normally say is that there are going to be high times and low times, right? And what usually it takes a little bit, maybe halfway through the quarter, for students to kind of figure out what times work with their schedule and what times work with how crowded the practice rooms are. It's also common for faculty to allow students to use their studios for additional practice. And so aside from those really high times, so we're talking like right before performance class on Friday, for example, aside from those really high times, I think our students do not typically have a hard time finding places to practice.
Yep, we're very proud of our facilities. The Newman Center is one of the finest performing arts centers in the United States for a university. And yeah, it's not something we hear a lot about, is lacking of spaces to practice in. Because if the practice rooms are full, you can always usually wander around and find an open room somewhere to practice.
We always joke that, of course, we're paid to say this, right? That our facilities are beautiful, but They're incredible. We're both musicians that neither of us went to DU, and I think both of us wish that the places we went had facilities like DU does. This is one of the things that we're just really, we're bummed this year, right? That we haven't been able to invite you all to campus. And I hope that some of you were able to visit at some point before the pandemic. And I hope that afterwards, one way or the other, you're able to join us. But it's a shame for us not to be able to welcome you on these Saturdays to the beautiful facilities, and for you to be able to sing and play in those spaces.
Yeah. Okay, so I went to University of Minnesota for my undergrad and University of Houston for grad school.
Oh yeah, so
I also just got a performance certificate from the.
Yeah. So yeah, somebody in the chat asked us where we went. I did my undergrad at CU Boulder. Actually started as a trumpet player and switched over to classical voice, and then did my grad work at Peabody Conservatory out in Baltimore. Let's see.
Okay, so can we use practice spaces for instruments we play that aren't our major? Okay, so that would be like if you're a voice major but you want to play on the drum kit. Usually no, there are those specific practice rooms are reserved for those areas, but you can always ask permission and get available or get into the space that way. It's maybe a little tough right now because of COVID protocols, and we've really kind of locked down things. But yeah, you can just ask the Mike Marlier, the jazz percussion professor, if you want to go play the drum kit. All right. Well, we're kind of getting near the end here, so let's do a final call for questions in the 4 minutes or so that we have left. So Kaylin's asking, are there classes for instruments outside your major? Yeah, Kaylin, just the general answer to that is that we welcome and we encourage you to explore musical interests outside of your major. And, we build electives into your degree program. So you can always use those elective credits to take classes or lessons or ensembles in that other interest that you have. And, as long as it fits into your schedule and you're getting all your requirements done, take as much of that as you want. What time of days are we allowed to use the practice rooms? So I believe during normal times, you have access to the building 24 hours. Does that sound right, Stephen? In normal times, you can access practice rooms?
Yeah, that was how it was before. Yeah.
So you can the building closes at 11 p.m., but you can literally practice in the middle of the night if you want to. When are symphony orchestra auditions typically held, and will they be held in a different format this year with COVID? Orchestra auditions are usually held in the first week of a quarter. As a music major, you will receive communication about all of those ensemble auditions. They're happening online this year, and Connor, hopefully by the time you're here in the fall, we can get back to in-person auditions for those. Lauren's asking, are we required to have piano proficiency? You are by the time you graduate with your degree, but not to get into school. No. You have the option of testing out of piano courses, but it is a requirement for your degree that you graduate with piano proficiency, whether you demonstrate that in the test that we offer or you take a series of courses. Alejandro's wondering how large is the voice department. It's about 60 or so voice majors. The choir, there's 3 choirs. There's the Lamont chorale, the women's chorus, and the men's chorus. And the numbers are a little different this year, but in a normal year, chorale is like 80, and then men's chorus and women's chorus are like 40 to 50.
There are also the American Heritage Chorale and Spirituals Project. The Spirituals Project choir is actually a community group that's now been brought into DU. So that's a great opportunity to both get ensemble credit, but interact with community members in predominantly spirituals musical genre. And then the American Heritage Chorale is much broader and focuses on American composers throughout. And that's a newer program at Lamont. And so they're doing some really exciting stuff. So keep an eye on that if you're coming in as a choir enthusiast.
Leon is asking about AP credits and how they transfer. Leon, I'm going to put in the chat the link to the matrix where you can determine how many credits you get for your AP. Oh, gotta love those AP credits. I'll tell you, that's like money in your pocket. I'm a big fan, and I used them in my undergraduate.
And Angela's a great example, actually, and I'll let her talk about it. But it's particularly good for you if you are interested in double majoring or minoring, like Angela did in undergrad.
Yes, I did a dual degree. I got a Bachelor of Music in Voice and a Bachelor of Science in Business. And in high school, I took a whole bunch of AP classes, and that helped me shave off a whole year of college. So I spent 5 years in college rather than 6. Yeah. Can non-voice majors audition for the choirs? Absolutely. In fact, non-majors can audition for any of our ensembles. You do not have to be a major to play or sing in any of them. You just have to play or sing well enough. Do instrumental musicians get to play in musicals or operas? Yes. So it's the Lamont Symphony Orchestra, Lamont Symphony that plays in the operas. We're doing right now 1 opera per year, and yeah, so not all instrumentalists get to play in the opera, but you'll certainly get a turn at some point during your time at Lamont. And does the female choir accept females only from a mezzo-soprano male speaking? Ryan, I'm going to actually give you the email address for our choir director. The answer is that they accept all voice parts. It's not related to gender. So, but I think I want to put you in touch with our professor, and then you guys can chat more about that. So I'm going to just put her email in the chat. I recommend you guys get in touch about that, and you can ask her any questions you have too about participating in the chorus. Do music majors take general studies? Yes. So you will have a common curriculum requirement of, I believe it's 60 credits of common curriculum classes. So those are broad categories of subjects that you have many different classes that you can take to fulfill those requirements. So it's, I'm going to pull up this sheet so I can get the exact number of credits real quick, but depending on what kind of music major you are, you will have, let's see, so it's 44 common curriculum credits versus out of a total of 194 credits for a music degree. And then Connor's asking, is there any entrance theory exam or singing exam for strings if admitted into Lamont? Connor, you will have the opportunity to take a theory proficiency exam when you get here, and you can possibly test out of a quarter of music theory, and you still have to take the required number of music theory credits. You'll just end up going a little further than your colleagues, which is a good thing. And Connor's asking how many of the general studies courses can be tested out of. So you can't test out of general studies courses, but you can earn AP credits and have those count for, or IB credits and have those count for your common curriculum credits.
Yeah, Connor, one of the reasons for that is that there are some specific ones that you can get exceptions for, like writing, but the way general studies or common curriculum works at DU is that there are these kind of 4 broad categories that then a ton of classes satisfy those requirements. And so there are tons of things for you to explore in those credits. All right, looks like we're at 6:03. You guys have kept us busy. This is great. We were wondering whether or not there'd be enough questions to fill an hour, and there were plenty. If you have more, Angela and I both dropped our emails in the chat. Maybe we'll do it again just to make it so it's right there for you. Email us if any other ones come up, and we look forward to seeing you. Angela, you can say anything else to close us out?
All right. Well, thanks everyone so much for joining us for this webinar. We are looking forward to having you join us on the next 3 Saturdays for your interview days. And please do not hesitate to get in touch with me or Stephen if you have any questions. We are here to help. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.